Hey guys, welcome back to Big Muddy Catfishing. This is your host, Mr. Bankpole Joe, and this is Bankpoles 101. We're talking about bait placement and which do you prefer, topwater or deepwater sets. Keep watching this video. Like and subscribe. Alright guys, we're back. First we're going to discuss topwater and why we set topwater, the good and bad things about setting topwater. Normally, when I was bank pole my first spot, which I'll see in my normal videos, the water level at normal level is probably about 15 feet. And this slope right here is a steep, really steep slope. So if I were to step off the edge right here and go set a pole, I could easily slip down into the river. That's how steep it is. So when you see me bank poling that spot, when it looks like my bait's only in 2 feet of water, this slope is probably a good 5 or 6 foot drop, and then it drops off into another shelf, which I believe that when the water's low, I catch a lot of flatheads, so I believe a lot of flatheads are sitting on this shelf feeding. When the water's high, I can't climb down with my ladder to this spot right here. I have to bank pole and set my poles from up here at top. And I set them top water because I always figure if they're sitting on this shelf, if fish are way down here, they're not going to know he's up here unless he comes up here to feed. And sometimes I'm not that lucky. They always get tangled up on the grass and the bushes that's normally sitting in this area. So I set them up high. But I've had a lot of numbers up high in that spot. But all my biggest fish in that spot have all come from setting it low. But when I set them low, both times that I caught the big fish in my videos, the water was down to this level. And we were fishing from here, and I dropped this line further down here and left it down here. But more or less, the line was like more or less leaning against the shelf. So when I caught my 2 40-pound flatheads, well, one was like 30-something pounds and the other was like 40 pounds, I caught it on this set right here. The same with the 41-pound blue cat. I caught him on the set with a bait that was sitting right about here and a bait sitting on the bottom. He hit the bait that was right about here, and those are my biggest fish of last year. Now, when I get the highest numbers, I've gotten the highest numbers from the top water set. So that's why we're debating, guys. What do you prefer, top water or setting them deep? And I'll tell you all the reasons why I set them top water versus setting them deep and otherwise. In this spot, if you set it deep, a lot of times I find that the grass and stuff that was growing here before the flood came is still here. And if I drop it deep, then that same bait fish tends to get tangled up in all that crap that's in there. Or there's floating debris that comes along the top that drags my line across, the bank and then gets it tangled up. And also the other problem is with the Missouri River, with the current, your line, when you drop it deep, doesn't necessarily sit straight up and down. It drags that line along the side of the bank on the current. So it's just sitting along the side of the bank more or less, not really free dangling underneath the water. It's more or less leaning on stuff. So that's why I don't set them deep. I try to set them high. That way I can get more bites. But it seems to me that to get the bigger fish, I'm going to have to get out more and then still drop it deep to where I can get down in this area. So next is another spot that I fish. We got a lot of ripwap down here. So there's a lot of places that I could get to. But when you get down here, there's a lot of rocks. So you have to set your bank pole back behind the rocks in the mud. And therefore, when you set your bank pole, you're throwing your line up and over this riprap. And then you got maybe clear a good 4 or 5 feet before you even start getting into where the drop off is even going to start. I hardly catch fish on this type of set because I feel like he's just laying up against this riprap here, and most fish aren't coming by to get it. I maybe get one every now and then, but I'm working on a way to get it out there, which I'll explain later in this video. So we'll go to our third example. Our third example is the way I think it should be done if you don't have a long enough pole to reach. So you setting your bank pole back behind the riprap rocks, and then attach those catfish bobbers that you see me make on my videos to the end of the pole, which is going to have a longer line, which therefore you can drop your bait in like you're bobber fishing and send that bobber out off over the edge. Plus, the fish gets to cover a wide range of area because he's swimming back and forth, dangling along that edge, that maybe there's a better chance of getting that fish, getting a catfish on when instead of him just being in this one spot, because now he's covering a wider range of area. So this is an ideal technique that I want to work on bobbers on bank poles. So guys, check that out. I'm going to try that this year, and hopefully we can get something out of that. Now, if we look at example 4, this right here is just your basic top water set. This is basically like in my first spot. If the water was high, this is normally what I would set. This is what you call a top water set. You're setting it about 6 inches under the surface. So every time that fish goes forward, left or right or backwards, it's breaking the surface, therefore making lots of noise. And any fish along here should hear that and draw attention and therefore cause them to attack. But for some reason, I haven't caught any big fish, 40, 50, 60 pounds plus coming off this bottom to get that fish up at the top. But I do get plenty of smaller fish that will come up and hit that. So they're more or less feeding in that upper echelon of that water level. And this is a basic deep water set. Setting your pole at a 45-degree angle. You're dropping your bait down. You're setting your bait just off the bottom where he's not laying on the bottom. You want him to kind of be free flowing right there. That was with the deep water set. So for you guys that like the deep water, that's exactly the way you're supposed to set those. And then example 6 is me fishing behind a wing dike, which is this, and this is a riprap rocks. Now if I can get a pole up over those rocks and then sling it out with a bobber and then drop that fish in between the wing dike and the riprap and drop it deep, maybe I can keep that fish from getting tangled up, and maybe I can get bites that way during high water or low water for those fish that are just resting in behind the wing dikes. Now this is what I said is a no-go for me. When you're behind the wing dike trying to fish and there's a lot of riprap rocks, or the bank is a shallow bank and it's the deep part is further out, I'm having to throw my string out there further and get a longer string, which is basically laying up against this rock and the bait's laying up against the bank. And there's always a good chance that the bait gets me twisted up in the riprap. So that always becomes a problem. So I always say those spots for me are a no-go until I figure out the bobber idea. So those are my reasons for asking why you guys set top water or deep water. Let me know in the comments below. Because what we do is we're trying to figure out where we're going to get these big fish. We're going to help people try to figure out how not to lose so much tackle, and especially for us on the Missouri. Missouri is real difficult. You have a top water current that's pretty doggone fast, and when you set baits on the top water underneath the surface, it tends to take the bluegill and turn it up on the side where the bluegill can't swim, and sometimes it'll go down in the water, but that current pushes them back up. So I come back to my bluegills either half dead or tired or half drowned, so that always becomes a problem. But also when you set it deep, the undertow in the Missouri River tends to twist up the line or get your bait twisted up, because it seems like your bait is spinning down under in the bottom of the river like this and twisting up to where it twists up on the leader line. Now, some people are doing the different sets. You might see a set like this to where you have the sinker, and the sinker leads down to your swivel, and most people are tying their leader line off the swivel. That's your basic way on the bank pole. If you're using a hog log or what the mud bums use, they make their leaders to where you slide your leader, you slide this through your sinker and then pulling it over just like this to where it's locked down. And then more or less your swivel setting up like that. So that's kind of what the mud bums do. It's hard. I messed up the tie on here by, let me see if I can fix it real quick. Yeah, there you go. So the mud bums are simply just taking the string, putting it through there, like so, taking your hook, going through the loop, pulling everything through. So basically, it sits like that, and then you have your hook at the bottom. That's the way I'm running my bank poles as far as my leaders go. But I think I want to try, check out Gigantic Dan. He does a lot of limb line fishing. He's got just under 500 subscribers, guys, so go check him out, give him a follow. But he says he sets up his lines like this. He's got sinker at the very bottom, so when he drops it to the bottom, only the sinker is sitting on the bottom of the river, and maybe about 1.5 feet or a foot up. He's got a swivel tied off with your leader line and your hook. You're hooking your bait, so your bait is always off the bottom, and that way you can always you can fill the bottom with that sinker. And then you have your bait sitting out like this. Now, my only problem with this is, as much as the current goes around in the river, I'm worried about that happening. And then the bait just sitting there and being twisted up. So you guys, tell me your opinions. Read the comments below. Tell me what you think. If you're a newbie, tell me what you would prefer to try or what you'd like to try. But I want to try this style at the end of my poles for the next time we go out, and we can see if we can change it up a little bit. So you guys keep watching. Don't forget to like, comment below, hit that subscribe button. Let's get us to 1K, guys. You know what I mean. Big Muddy Catfishing with Bankpole Joe. Peace.